Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning or good afternoon from the Batcave. It is Tuesday, September 17th, 2022, or 2024, and I'm going to continue to walk you guys through this series on defending the canon. We're going to look at 1st and 2nd Esdras today. So if you remember the chronology I was putting forward for you guys, I'm saying here's the books that we have, and here's the timelines of when they claim to have been written. Here's the timelines that we're putting together of when they were probably really written. So again, we have Psalm 151 and Wisdom of Solomon are claimed to have been written obviously in the days of David and Solomon. This is bullcrap. These are probably written centuries afterwards. Prayer, Manasseh, and Tobit were claimed to have been written around the time that of the Assyrian captivity of northern Israel. We're putting this probably in the Second Temple period, and this is probably just a made-up writing then as well. Letter of Jeremiah and Baruch, Judith, the Prayer of Azariah, and Susanna and Bel and the Dragon. These are all claimed to have been written around the time of the captivity of southern Judah, or of Judah and the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon, or at least within that generation, because it's going to go into Daniel's reign. So this is going to be within roughly 40, 50 years of the destruction of Jerusalem. We're going to say that most of these were probably written in the Second Temple period. And then we are now on to the additions to Esther and 1st and 2nd Ezra. So we're going to try to cover these. These are all claimed to have been written in the 5th century. So you want to think the time of after the Babylonians been taken over by the Persians. Most of these things are going to have a claim that they're written in the days of Ahasuerus, which you're going to find out that the Jews did not understand their history. Remember, the history that we have of Persia now comes from a combination of archaeological records and 3 Greek sources, which is going to be Thucydides, who was, I think, a doctor for these 10,000 mercenaries that served the Persians. And then the other guy is going to be Xenophon, who is the second major source on Socrates. So Plato and Xenophon are the main 2 guys we know about Socrates' discourses from. And he was a commander in that army of 10,000 people that served the Persians. And then Herodotus, who is going to be a little before them, but most of his is coming from word of mouth hearsay, which he's collecting from the known Middle Eastern, Persian, Egyptian, and Greek world. So those 3 guys were putting together what their records are, and they don't always agree. And the reason they don't always agree is because we have war going on between the Greeks and the Persians in this time, and then we also have coups and overthrows of dynasties in Persia at this time. So you're going to have the section where you have Cyrus and Cambyses and Cyaxares, or Cyaxares and Astyages. These guys are basically going to be around the time that Babylon is destroyed, but you actually have it looks like a coup or a civil war going on between the Medes and the Persians, and that's why the Medo-Persian Empire becomes the Persian Empire, and that's the Achaemenid dynasty, because what you have is Medes and Persians as like allies after Nineveh gets destroyed, the Assyrian Empire, and then the Middle East, so Mesopotamia on over to the Mediterranean, is going to be controlled by Babylon. And basically the Medo-Persians are going to get the rest of the Assyrian Empire, and then everything to the east of that, which would be most of Iran today. And then let's actually pull up some maps so this is easier to understand. This is going to be the Babylonian Medo-Persian Empire. Egypt still independent. Nebuchadnezzar invades it and beats up on the Jews that ran away there per Jeremiah's prophecy, but that's it. Lydia is going to become independent at this time. They were kind of under the Hittites for a while, and then they were under Assyria for a bit, and then they become independent, but Cyrus of Persia is going to conquer them. This is really a Median empire, but it seems like they're intermarried in with the Persians, and the Persians are going to be, you see Susa right here, these were the old Elamites. These are not going to be the same people, but that's going to become their capital. So the Elamites are a Semitic people. These Persian people are probably a tribe of either Turkish or Median peoples, or a mixture of these two. And they're essentially going to control up to the Indus River, which think Pakistan. Okay, so really very comparable to Iran today. And the Medes are basically going to get that northern territory of Assyria. So think this would be Urartu or Ararat. And these are kind of more independent tribal peoples. And then Lydia is going to come up. And this is going to be the actual original Lud, the descendants of Lud were Semites. But you're going to have Lydia, which is kind of a mixture of Greek and Japhethite and Semitic people. And the language has shifted over time, but it's going to be named after Lud, which is going to be one of, I think, the youngest son of Shem. Okay, so this is going to be what we're seeing here is the end of the Semitic era of. Remember, Babylon is from our Faxad; those are Semitics. Elam is Semitic. Assyria is Semitic. Lydia is Semitic. Israel is Semitic. It's going to be the end of the Semitic empires, and we're going into the rise of the Japhethite empire. So the Medes are Japhethites, the Persians are Japhethites, the Greeks are Japhethites, the Romans are Japhethites, okay? And the Persians are basically like a strong people group that are within the Median domain. Remember, the Medians are strong right here, but they and the Persians together are kind of coalescing this into a single empire, and they kind of need them. And so they're intermarried with them. And eventually the Persians are going to become stronger and take it over. And all of these things are actually prophesied in Daniel. This is why people, are so, your seculars all the way back to ancient times have a problem with Daniel and say it was written after the fact because of how accurately it predicts these things. So when he talks about these four beasts and he talks about the lion with eagle's wings, that's Nebuchadnezzar. And then he talks about a bear that was raised up on one side and 3 ribs in its mouth. These are going to be 3 major conquests of this kingdom. This is the bear. It's going to conquer this, this, and this. Those are the three ribs in the bear's mouth. So it's a bear who's raised up on one side. Now look at this. Here's a bear. There's this big fat paw, right? And he's raised up on one side. And the reason is because even though the Medes start this kingdom, the majority of this is kind of dominated by the Persians because they're the main rear guard, if you will, the people who are holding this all back, and they hold this to this nice firm border in the Indus here, and that's why they're going to have the strength to eventually overthrow the Medes and become even stronger. And once the Persians become stronger, they're going to take Babylon, Lydia. You see Cyrus here. This is all Cyrus over the course of a few years. And then Cyrus's son Cambyses is going to take Egypt. And you see this from 47 to 25. So over the course of 22 years, they're going to conquer these 3 old established kingdoms. I mean, this is essentially what emerged after the Hittite Empire. This is essentially what emerged after the Assyrian Empire. And then Egypt's been, an established kingdom for some time. And this is going to become the biggest empire the world has ever known. So Daniel prophesies this. And he prophesies it very accurately. He's going to have another one that's going to have these vision with these 2 rams, and one of the rams is going to be one of its horns is bigger than the other, and that's representing the Medo-Persians. So what it is it's an empire of 2, like a shared dominion between the Medes and the Persians, but the Persians are clearly stronger, and they end up taking over the whole thing. Okay, so once you get to Daniel 11. You're going to have, it actually starts in Daniel 10, you're going to have this angel giving this final prophecy to Daniel, which is going to lead to the prophecy about the Antichrist in the last time. And when it's going to be in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Well, you need to know which Cyrus there is, and this is where the Jews are going to get confused back in their day, because we know, because we have all this archaeology and we have all this history. And it's still not clear. It's still not crystal, but we have a general consensus on where they are. We know there's multiple Dariuses, there's multiple Xerxes, multiple Cyruses. And we have to figure out which one's first and which one this is talking about. This is in the 3rd year of Cyrus of Persia, and we find out it's in the 1st year of Cyrus of Persia that the people first get released to go back and rebuild the temple. So we know that Daniel is prophesying roughly 2 years after the Jews first start going back to rebuild the temple. Okay, this is a big deal because in Daniel 9, if you remember, Daniel 9, it says this is in the 1st year of Darius. This is after Babylon is sacked. Okay, so it's the 1st year after that. he is praying about the Jews going back to rebuild the temple. He's thinking about the 70 years and the desolations of Jerusalem. And Darius is actually ruling under Cyrus. And there are prophecies about a Cyrus releasing the Jews to rebuild the temple. And this is what Daniel's prophesying about. Now, this is not 70 years later, and this is where people are going to make a mistake. And this is Darius the Mede, or this is Darius the Persian. In Daniel, this is this guy called Darius the Mede, son of Ahasuerus. This is not the Persian son of this is an unknown person. And some people think this might be another name for this Cyaxares, who would have been the last descendant of the Medes before the Persians took over, because this time of history is we don't have complete agreement. They think it could be this Cyaxares or this Astyages, because in this time frame you have Babylon getting sacked. Cyrus isn't directly involved with it, but you have a discrepancy in different histories over whether Cyrus was in charge of the Medo-Persian Empire by this time, or if Cyaxares was in charge of the Medes. And so because you have these conflicting records about who is really in charge here, we don't really know who this Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of the seed of the Medes, is. We see the biblical records, including Daniel, distinguish between the Medes and the Persians, so they obviously know the difference between these two people. And we know Ahasuerus of the Persians is Xerxes. But apparently there's a Xerxes of the Medes with a son named Darius, and this guy was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, okay? Notice he said was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. So the indication is he's under somebody else. He's not made king if he sacked Babylon and he took it by force. Somebody appointed him as the ruler. Remember, the king usually just means ruler. It doesn't mean the complete sovereign. But he has jurisdiction over over the entire realm of the Babylonians, which seems to have been taken by Cyrus. Now, it could have been Cyaxares and Cyrus. Cyaxares would have been an old man at this time. It could have even been his son who was ruling for a little bit, but there's dispute on whether or not that really happened. But the point is you have this Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, the son of the Medes, and some people think it's this general Gobirus. Nobody really knows for sure who this is. Was made king over the realm of Chaldeans, which means whoever's ruling the Medes and the Persians has appointed this guy to rule over Babylon immediately after it was sacked. And it's like a general, like we would have MacArthur was ruling over, Admiral MacArthur was ruling over Japan after we defeated Japan in World War II until a new government was installed. Well, this guy is going to be over the realm of Nebuchadnezzar and his descendants, which is basically Mesopotamia all the way to the Mediterranean until they reorganize it as part of the Persian Empire. And it looks like this is going to be a couple of years. And then once he's done, this guy probably just dies of old age and he reorganizes it. Then we have Cyrus in charge of the whole thing because he's now synced it up with the Persian Empire. And by this time, Cyrus is king of the Persians, he's king of the Medes, he's king of the Babylonians, everything. Okay. And so you see him, Babylon falls in 540, and you see him as king of the Babylon in 539, which means you probably had this short period where this Darius, the son of the Medes, and again, it's like a period of a couple years, is ruling over it, and then he dies of old age, and it is now synced up, and it goes to Cyrus the Great. And so Cyrus the Great is ruling over the Medes. He takes over from this Astyages. He's ruling over Lydia because he conquers that. And he's ruling over Babylon because he had another guy conquer Babylon, and then that synced up to him. And he establishes the Achaemenid Empire, which is the overarching empire over the whole thing. So this is the new Persian Empire versus the Medo-Persian Empire. He was over Persia before that, which was essentially a dominion under the Medes, but it was kind of a partner dominion, not necessarily entirely a subject. And then his son is going to add Egypt to the empire. So we see he's over all this stuff. And so this Cyrus, who Daniel is referencing here, is Cyrus the Great. So we have a starting point. Now, if you go to Ezra, this is the biblical Ezra, you have the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So this is 2 years before Daniel gives this prophecy. And if you go back to Daniel, he says in the 3rd year of Cyrus, he gets this prophecy. And this angel comes to him, and he says in chapter 11 that this angel says, in the 1st year of Darius the Mede, I stood to confirm and strengthen him. So he was the one who basically was supporting Darius the Mede in his sacking of Babylon. This is the angel that was behind him. And he said, I will show you the truth. Behold, there will stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength, through his riches, he will stir up all against the realm of Greece. So let's see what happens. So the 3 kings that are going to be after Cyrus are going to be Cambyses II, followed by this Bardia, who just rules for like a year, followed by Darius the Great. Those are the 3 that come after him, followed by Xerxes. That's the 4th that's going to be more powerful than them all. And of course, Xerxes is famous for his invasion of Greece, which is going to be met with the 300 Spartans and all the Greeks unifying and defeating the Persians. And this becomes the beginning of Persian decline. So you have under the Persians that had this massive empire here in the days of Cyrus. By the time you get to Xerxes, which is going to be 50 or so years later, they're going to get uppity, and they're going to get up into here in Greece, and then Greece is going to start pushing back. And they go into decline. They go back and forth against Greece, but they ultimately start to go into decline, and the Greeks start to rise, just like this angel says. And then the ultimate one who is going to defeat them is going to be Alexander the Great. So this prophecy is going to be exact. Again, this is supposed to be in the 3rd year of Cyrus that this prophecy is given, and it gives you the next 3 kings of the Persians, and then tells you who the richest one is going to be, and then that richest one is going to march this massive army into Greece and be defeated. And this is a really famous battle because they're going to cross, I think it's called the Hellespont, but they're going to line up a bunch of ships to cross here with a massive army, and they're going to come over here, and the 300 Spartans are going to hold them up, and that's going to stir up the Greeks, and the Greeks are going to be encouraged against them, and so the Greeks are all going to ally, and they're going to push them back. And they fail, and they keep trying to mess with Greek affairs after that, but what they end up doing is it is ultimately succumbing to the Greeks, and it's going to take 200 years for them to fall. But by the time that the Greeks start to push back against them in the days of Xerxes, I mean, you're talking Xerxes is 465. It's about by the 340s that Alexander the Great comes. So it's going to be about 120 years yet. So that's that prophecy, and this kind of gives you a time frame for where you are in the biblical chronology. Now, this prophecy goes out in the 3rd year of Cyrus the Great. So now we want to get into the book of Ezra and understand the true timeline of Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, Ezra is going to take place in the 1st year of Cyrus the Great. So we're going to have your historical record says that Jerusalem was destroyed by Babylon in 486. Cyrus the Great starts to rule in, 586. Cyrus the Great starts to rule over Babylon in 539. So we know the Jews were in Babylon from 586 to 539, which is going to be 47 years. Remember how I keep saying the Jews are there between 40 and 50 years. Okay, so it's 47 years. And then he's going to give the Jews permission to go back and rebuild their temple. So that's going to be in his day, but the temple is not going to be completed till about 518. So I don't know where the Jews in Jesus' day get the idea that this temple was 46 years in building. They might be talking about Herod's expansion of the temple, but 539 to 518 is basically going to be about 21 years building the temple, not the city, just the temple. And then where you're going to have some confusion in the record of Ezra is when you get to chapter 4, because it talks about the people who wanted to be involved in building the temple, but the Jews would not let them, and these are the Tobiads, and these are the Samaritans. So these are essentially mixed Jews, and remember the Jews are starting to get racist here, and racial purity is a big deal to them, and so they're not letting these part Jews take part in it, and then those basically part Jews are going to send letters back to Persia to obstruct the Jews from doing it because they're ticked. And what he says is that they're building it in the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, and this is Zerubbabel and Jeshua who are leading this. Ezra and Nehemiah are not in the picture yet, okay? You have Zerubbabel is a descendant of David. He was born in Babylon. This would be the first descendant born in Babylon. And then Joshua is going to be the high priest, and these guys are going to be noted in Zechariah and Haggai. And then it says that these guys would have hired counselors from them. It says all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, the king of Persia. Well, this is how long they're going to obstruct them from building the temple, from Cyrus to Darius. And Darius is going to be, they're going to have Cyrus, then Cambyses, then Darius. So Darius the Great, you see 522 to 486 is when he rules. By 518, they're able to build the temple. They're able to finish it, okay? So Cambyses is between these guys. So you have Cyrus, Cambyses, then Darius. They don't mention Cambyses. And in the Bible, they don't mention rulers that are not pertinent to the storyline, and they're going to go back and forth in the storyline, okay? So what this point in Ezra is talking about is how these people from Samaria and the Tobiads, which are in Jordan but also in Jerusalem, their enemies, these people who are inhabiting the land but are not of the Jews, are giving them trouble. And so they hire counselors to frustrate their building the temple from Cyrus to Darius, and then in Darius they're going to complete it. And then also, so this should have been better translated also in the reign of Ahasuerus, that's Xerxes, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote to him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem, and in the days of Artaxerxes. So this is Xerxes and Artaxerxes, that's his son, okay? Wrote Bishlam, Medadil, and Tudriel. So these other guys are also frustrating them or writing letters against them after this. And so what this part of Ezra is accounting is how these people are against them and writing the Persians to accuse them to the Persians during this period, which is really going to be about 100 years. It's a 100-year period, and this is between Zerubbabel and Joshua and Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah come later, and Zerubbabel and Joshua come before, and you're going to have like a 100-year gap between them. But the Jews don't, in the Second Temple period, this is going to be the post-Hasmonean 160 AD, so this is going to be like 300-400 years later. They don't understand this history, okay? They don't understand that Ezra and Nehemiah and Zerubbabel and Joshua are like 100 years apart, and they're going to try to smush them together. And this is the reason why they do that. See, in this record, you're going to have what the point is making is how these people keep obstructing the Jews. It's not saying the temple was obstructed all this time. It's saying that they're going to keep writing them, and you see it keeps talking about, and then they wrote this in the days of Artaxerxes, and they wrote this in the days of Artaxerxes, and here's a copy of the letter they wrote to Artaxerxes. And then at the end of this, he's going to say, now the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum and Shimshi the scribe, their companions, and they went up in haste to Jerusalem and made them cease and force by power. That should be the end of that chapter, of that section, because this is talking about all the obstructions the Jews have by this. And then it says here, then ceased the work on the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. So it ceased in the 2nd year of Darius, the king of Persia. Well, there's multiple Dariuses, and this is where they get confused. This is basically this should be actually the heading of this chapter. Okay? So where it says then, you don't really have let's see what the word is. When you go to the Aramaic, you have this word Uveidine, which means then or at that time. So essentially, the words that they translate in the end of Ezra 4, then cease the work in the house of God, it means like at that time. And what it really is doing is going back to this Darius, the king of Persia, but the Jews think this is the second Darius II. And they don't have these great historical records that tell them when this Darius and this Darius and this Darius rules, because that history has not been composed yet. Okay? It's in this time that they're writing this, these guys know who's the king when they're writing this, and this is probably written in the days of Ezra, which is why it's called Ezra, but it's accounting things that were 100 years earlier in the days of Joshua and Zerubbabel. Well, when we get to 2nd Esdras, they think Zerubbabel and Ezra are the same person. This is how ignorant they are. Well, the reason is because they're trying to connect this Darius of Persia here and this Darius of Persia here. Or I'm sorry, they're trying to make them Darius the first and Darius the second, when in fact they're the same Darius. And this should actually be, this verse 24 should actually be the beginning of Ezra 5. And so he's saying at that time that their Darius is that it's ceased until the days of Darius. He's saying at that time it was ceased until the days of Darius. But then after that, as a consequence of it being ceased in the days of Darius, Haggai and Zechariah stand up, and Haggai and Zechariah are specifically mentioning Zerubbabel and Joshua in their prophecies, as encouraging them to keep building in the temple. And the reason is because they have authority from Cyrus the Great to rebuild the temple. They can't rebuild the city, but they can rebuild the temple. And so Haggai and Zechariah basically say, get up and keep rebuilding the temple. Never mind these guys. And what they do is they essentially arm themselves and they resist those people who are trying to stop them from building the temple, and they just keep doing it. Okay, they don't fight a war or anything, but they show that they're armed, and they're basically like, no, we're going to keep building the temple, and they complete the temple. And so you see that it says, but the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, so that they could not cause them to cease until the matter came to Darius, and then they returned them by letter saying this matter. And this copy went to Tattenai, the governor on that side of the river. So this is the same. This is not those later guys who were writing until the days of Artaxerxes. This is in that original generation. So what you want to do when you're reading Ezra 4 is take out, you go to here and you take out everything up to Darius the king of Persia, and then you take verse 6 through verse 23 and understand that that's all in the generations after this. Okay? So it's almost like that's what's happening up to Ezra and Nehemiah. And then it goes back to this Darius II that they were talking about, and we're back in the days of the original guys who were giving them guff. And those original guys that are giving them guff, basically, Darius finds out that Cyrus gave him permission to build the temple, and Darius is like, let it ride, let him do it, okay? And so it says, so it ceased unto the second year of the reign of Darius the king of Persia. It's going back to what they were talking about in the previous chapter, okay? So then it's going to cease, and these guys are going to basically keep working on it until the matter goes to Darius, because they want an opportunity. Now that these guys are armed, let's raise an army and let's force these guys to stop. And Darius looks into it and finds out, oh, Cyrus gave them permission to build the temple, so let it ride. And so he's gonna confirm, let him keep building the temple. And it says, so Darius made a decree, and search was made in the house of the rolls, and the treasure was up, and they looked in the roll of the Medes, and they find out that Cyrus gave him permission to rebuild the temple. And so he's going to say, keep going. And it says, the house was finished in the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which is the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. So the 6th year of the reign of Darius the first, you see 1522 is 516. So 516 BCE is when they finish it. And that's a very important day, okay? The ultimate reason why Ezra and Nehemiah are in your Bible is because one is going to give you the 70 years of the desolations of Jerusalem. The other one is going to give you the beginning of Daniel's messianic prophecy. So if you remember, Jeremiah appoints 70 years for the desolations of Jerusalem. And the whole point of Cyrus, it says in the end of First Chronicles and in the end of, or in the beginning of Ezra, it talks about, this is the major purpose of the book, how Cyrus the king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus the king of Persia, and he made a proclamation throughout all of his kingdom, put in writing, that go back and build the house of Jerusalem, okay? Nothing about building the city. It's about building the Jerusalem temple, which has been destroyed and lies desolate. And there's 70 years for this desolation of Jerusalem. So Cyrus is fulfilling the word that this has to be done by 70 years. Otherwise, the word of the Lord has failed, because Jeremiah said there's going to be 70 years for the desolations of Jerusalem. Well, it's destroyed in 586. When is it rebuilt? It's rebuilt in the 6th year of Darius, which is going to be 516. So it's exactly 70 years from when the temple is destroyed till the temple is rebuilt. This is the whole significance of Ezra. This is why it's in the canon, even though it mentions a couple prophets, but there's no prophecies, there's no word of the Lord in it. It mentions Ezra, or it mentions Haggai and Zechariah, encouraging them to get back up and keep rebuilding, because the Lord is stirring this up to make sure this is accomplished by 70 years. Okay? So that all happens in the days of Zerubbabel and Joshua before Ezra comes into the picture. And so they finish it, and then after that, see how he's saying now after these things, okay? So in Ezra 6, they finish the temple, and that's in the 2nd year of Darius. Now take all those writings that talk about all the guff that their neighbors are giving them towards Xerxes and towards Artaxerxes, trying to put them down and have them condemned as people who are potential traitors, to try to get them to stop working on the temple, the city, and just obstruct them in general, okay? Now we skip to Artaxerxes. And Artaxerxes is going to be, let's see, compared to Darius when they finished the temple is 522. Artaxerxes is 465. So from 518 to 465, we've passed another 50 years. See why I say this is about 100 years? Okay? It's going to be roughly 80 years from the beginning of Ezra to the end of Ezra, where they're dealing with Artaxerxes. And it's going to be like in the 12th year of Artaxerxes, so we're looking at like 444, I think. That this is done, and then we're going to sync in with Nehemiah. Okay, so you're going to have now Artaxerxes, and now you see Zadok, the son of Ahitub. So this is Ezra coming into the picture. Ezra, the son of Sariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Zadok, and he goes all the way back to really Aaron, but he skips between Zadok the first and Zadok the second because for whatever reason this is a truncated genealogy. And so this is Ezra. He's a priest and he's a scribe. He's not a prophet, which as second Ezra is going to claim, he's a priest and a scribe. And he's gonna bring a second group of people up in the days of Artaxerxes. And in the days of Artaxerxes, he is going to give them a bunch of provisions for the keeping of the sacrifices. And then he's going to give Ezra civil jurisdiction over the land beyond the river. Okay, now the land beyond the river, this term is just used generically throughout the Bible. So in a lot of cases, the land beyond the river is either talking about the other side of the Euphrates or this side, depending on who's talking. And so what the Jews are going to do in the Second Temple period is they're going to say, oh, beyond the river always means this side of the Euphrates. So what they're going to claim is that the Persians gave the Jews control over all this, not just the land over here on the other side of the Jordan River, but the land over here on the other side of the Euphrates. And this land in the days of the Seleucids, so that's who Antiochus Epiphanes comes from. This is 300 years later. They call this land on this side of the Euphrates, this is where Syria would be. They call it Soel, Syria. And it literally means like the gap of Syria or something like that. But it's basically Syria on the side of the river, okay? And what the Jews are going to do are they're going to take, let's see, they're going to take this decree where it says, and thou Ezra, this is Artaxerxes' letter, and thou Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thy hand, set magistrates and judges, which may judge all the people that are beyond the river. Notice he says beyond the river. And if you look at the Aramaic, let's see, just says Abar Nahar. So this is Aramaic. Well, the Greeks are going to call the region, again, beyond the Euphrates River, Soel, Syria. And so what you're going to find in Esdras is they're going to take this exact same letter. Remember, this is a copy of a letter from Artaxerxes to Ezra, giving him authority of everybody over the Jordan River, on the other side of the Jordan River, so essentially what used to be Israel, to basically make the Mosaic law the law of the land. and so they have to do it. And it says this. He said, teach them to know the laws. And he said, whoever will not do the law of thy God and the law of the king. Okay, remember, he's decreeing that they follow the law of the Mosaic law in the land of Israel, which is what God said to do. Okay, he says, let judgment be executed speedily upon them, whether it be death or banishment or confiscated goods or imprisonment. Okay, in other words, what he is saying, he's giving Ezra authority to judge the land of Israel according to the Mosaic law. They're still in the Gentile captivity, but he's given jurisdiction to rule the land as if it was under the Mosaic law. Okay, now, when we get to Esdras, they're going to change this letter, and they're going to say that when you see the land beyond the river, remember, this is in Greek, this is in Aramaic, they're going to translate it into Greek, where it says all the people that are beyond the river, it's going to say all the people of Soel, Syria, which is a province organized by Antiochus Epiphanes and his ancestors. And what they're going to claim is a much bigger domain. So instead of saying they had this domain right here, he's going to say they had this domain all the way to over here. So they're going to claim Syria in the name of Israel. And the Jews are going to do this to this day. In the days of the Antichrist, they're going to rule all the way up to the Euphrates River. It's written in Isaiah 18. They take over all of Syria. And it's in... it's in Isaiah, I think it's in Isaiah 18, maybe Isaiah 13, and it's kind of hinted at in Micah 5. So you're gonna see this. You're gonna see the Jews take over all this land because they have been claiming since the days of the Hasmoneans that the Medes and the Persians gave them all the land, essentially, that David controlled, all the way up to Euphrates, when they really didn't. They gave them this and the Phoenicia. If they gave them all this, they wouldn't have had to point out and Phoenicia. So Ezra is going to get this jurisdiction. Ezra is not the high priest. He's a scribe, but he is given the jurisdiction by Artaxerxes. And then in Artaxerxes' day, this is going to be, I think, in the 12th year, or what year of Artaxerxes is this? He just says in the reign of Artaxerxes. This is in the 7th year of Artaxerxes this happens, okay? So in the 7th year of Artaxerxes, he gets this letter, and Ezra can execute law. And what Ezra immediately starts doing is forcing people to divorce their Gentile wives, because he's got all the secular jurisdiction. Now we're going to get to Nehemiah. Nehemiah is going to come into the picture 5 years later, because he is there, and it says in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. I'm sorry, not 5 years later. This is going to be 13 years later. Nehemiah is going to come in. And Nehemiah is coming in, and this is important, because God is stirring up Nehemiah towards building Jerusalem, the city. The temple's been built. They're carrying out the sacrifices. They're bringing in the annual harvest for the sacrifices, which means the desolations of Jerusalem are over. Okay? It doesn't mean Jerusalem as the city is rebuilt. It just means its desolations are over, because the temple is restored, and they're now carrying out, the land has carried out its Sabbaths, and now they're carrying out their first fruit offerings and stuff like that again. Okay? 13 years later, Nehemiah is going to come in, and God is stirring him up to build the city wall. And why? Because that is going to trigger Daniel's 70 weeks of years prophecy. So Jeremiah's 70 years prophecy is fulfilled in Ezra. Daniel's 70 weeks of years prophecy starts in Nehemiah. These are two entirely different prophecies. They're not the same thing. Okay? One is from the destruction of Jerusalem to the rebuilding of the temple. The other one is from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the death of Messiah. They're two entirely different prophecies. Okay? So now in the 20th year, you're going to have Nehemiah come in, and this whole book is about Nehemiah and his struggle to rebuild the temple, or rebuild the city wall. And then when he's done, he also is going to go after people for not speaking Hebrew He doesn't like that the people speak the land of the Philistines and the Egyptians and stuff like that. And he is also going to force people to put away their Gentile wives. So you have two different phases of this in Ezra and then 13 years later in Nehemiah. And by this time, racial purity becomes pretty much the law of the land as long as the Jews are running things. And it's going to stay that way until the Greeks come in and start taking stuff over. And the last thing you're going to have is then Malachi rebuking them for forcing people to divorce their wives and saying that this is an abomination. So that's really how the Old Testament ends. Well, these guys, remember, all this stuff is done by the 22nd year of Artaxerxes. So that's 444 BC. The days of the Hasmoneans is like 300 years later. So 300 years later, these guys don't have a great grasp on Persian history. They don't have a great grasp on the historical record that aligns with Ezra and Nehemiah. They don't. And so they don't understand Daniel. They're going to butcher that in the Septuagint reading. And they're going to essentially come up with a new version of Ezra and Nehemiah called First Esdras. And First Esdras is just going to totally mix up stuff, and it's going to say, listen, to King Artaxerxes the Lord, from your servants Rathmus the recorder, the scribe, and the rest of the council, and the judges who are in Soel, Syria, or Phoenicia. And this is how we just know this is a forged letter, okay? It's not called Soel, Syria in the days of the Persians. It doesn't get called that until the Greeks. And it's literally going to be in the days of like Antiochus Epiphanes. So it's not even right away when they do this. It's like once the Greeks take over and then they start breaking up their dominion in the days of the Seleucids into different provinces that are managed by different governors and stuff like that. One of those provinces is going to be Soel, Syria. And that is basically the Syrian territories. Remember, they get Syria from Assyria. The name, the people in the Bible, if you look in the in the Hebrew or the Aramaic, they're called Arameans because that's what they're really named. But because it was all Assyria one time, they call this Soel Assyria. Why? And this is where we get the name Syria from. Eventually, the Greeks or the Romans are going to come in and have a territory that they call Syro-Palestine. And that's going to be the region from this Syrian region in Mesopotamia down through the region where the Philistines were. That's why it's called Syro-Palestine. This Soel Syria is basically means, I forget what Soel Syria actually means. Let me see. The Hollow of Syria. So they call it the Hollow of Syria because it's this space. So we have Syria here, the well-occupied Syria. And this is kind of almost the more wilderness area of Syria. So that's why it's called the Hollow of Syria. And what they're claiming, see, you have Phoenicia here, and they're claiming that, remember, this was all controlled by David at one point in time, and they're claiming all of this was given to them by the Persians when it really wasn't even named this until the Seleucids. If you just look up Soel Syria, it's widely accepted that the term Soel is a transcription of the Aramaic kul, which means all or the entire, such as the term was originally identified all of Syria. The word Soel, which literally means hollow in Koine Greek, is thought to have come about via folk etymology referring to the hollow Bekaa area between Mount Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon mountains. However, the term Soel Syria was also used in a wider sense to indicate all of Syria, all Syria except Phoenicia, by the writers Pliny, Arrian, Ptolemy, Diodorus, Siculus, and again, all these guys are Pliny, that's 32 AD. These are all later Greek writers. And so it says the first and only official use of the term was during the Seleucid rule in region between 200 BCE and 64 BCE. So it's literally the area, remember, it's like the 160s BC that the Hasmoneans take over, and it's literally only been called Soel Syria for maybe 50 years before that. So that's how we know this was written in this era, because that's when they started calling it Soal Syria, and they're going to use this term again and again and again in Esdras, and they're going to forge it into letters that were supposedly written by the Persians 300 years earlier. So these are fake letters. This is a fake name. These are the Hasmoneans, or people related to them, trying to claim that they were given this much larger dominion by the Persians. And why are they doing that? Because Antiochus Epiphanes' empire is falling apart. They're trying to take over as much of it as they can, and they're trying to prove to the Romans that this was their domain under the Persians legally, and even in the days of Alexander the Great when it was taken over, because they had, peacefully submitted to Alexander the Great. So what they're claiming is this huge territory, essentially the whole territory of David, by forgery. That's what they're doing. And so that's a major rationale for the book of First Esdras, and this book was probably written by the Hasmoneans as a way to solidify their rule over a larger swath of land during while basically crushing Ezra and Nehemiah into a single narrative that takes place over 50 years instead of 100. And so they're going to keep saying, see, it says Jerusalem, who reigned and exacted tribute in Soal, Syria, and Phoenicia. Remember, they were given the land beyond the river, beyond the Jordan River. They were literally just given what is closer to modern Israel today, but they're claiming that was what was given to them was the ability to exact taxes and tribute from all of Syria and Phoenicia. So again, they're gonna put this in this letter, in this thing, as if it was written from the Persians as often as they can. So that's our first major clue that this thing is a forgery. Then what they're going to do, because this is just an honest mistake, I think, they think Ahasuerus sounds more like Artaxerxes than Xerxes. Ahasuerus is the Jewish name for Xerxes, who is married to Esther, but they think that it's Artaxerxes, so they're going to smush the two of them together. Well, Ahasuerus is Artaxerxes' father, and because of this, they're going to remove a generation, because if you see, Artaxerxes is going to rule from 465 to 424, and Xerxes is going to rule from 518 to 465. They just merged these guys together. What did they do? They just got rid of like 50 years. Because this guy's got when does he rule? 46 to 465. So that's going to be a 21-year reign, and the other guy's going to have like a 40-year reign, because that's his son who starts ruling when he's like 20. So they're going to merge these guys' reign together, and they're going to get rid of like 20 years. Then they're going to make these other claims against the Edomites. Remember, the Hasmoneans are crushing the Edomites and forcing them to accept Jewish rule in this time. So one of the things it's going to say here is that he says, you vowed to build the temple which the Edomites burned when Judea was made desolate by the Chaldeans. Okay, we have no record of the Edomites burning the temple. That would have been done by the Babylonian armies. There possibly could have been Edomites in that army. Certainly, because they would have had all kinds of transcripts from all over the place. But they're blaming specifically the Edomites because they hate them to death. And this is a fake story that's made up about Zerubbabel convincing Cyrus, or convincing Artaxerxes to let them rebuild the temple. Zerubbabel they literally have this fake story in here, and I'm gonna show you the beginning of the story. It starts in the days of King Darius. Now we know from Ezra that Zerubbabel had already gone up to Israel in the days of Cyrus. And what they're going to claim is that Zerubbabel was actually part of the royal guard of Darius, and he convinces Darius to let him keep building the temple. There is no way this guy is one of the captive Jews and of the royal line is going to go back to Israel and then go all the way back to Susa, where Darius, or wherever this would be, Susa or Ecbatana, where King Darius is ruling, and then somehow join his royal guard in a space of 10, 20 years. This is not going to happen. No way this is going to happen. One is he's probably a much older man than that. And you're going to have this made-up legendary story about how King Darius asked these three guys what is the strongest between wine, the king, or women. And the third guy, which is Zerubbabel, gives this story about how women are so powerful and they can get men to do all this stuff. And the king likes his wisdom and he says, okay, what favor can I grant you? And he's like, well, grant us to rebuild the temple. This is just a made-up Jewish fairy tale. They make up these stories all the time. They're stupid. They don't align with the history. And basically they're saying that's what caused Darius. Just like how you have Nehemiah is at the right hand of the king and he's urging the king to let them rebuild the city. You have apparently Zerubbabel giving this stupid why. These are like Arabian Nights type tales. These stories that are like proverbial plus cute plus whatever, and it somehow feeds into the narrative of what's going on. And it's just this really stupid story that they're going to add. And you're going to find this in Josephus, just like you're going to find these additions to Esther in Josephus. Josephus buys these stories as history. And so this story places Zerubbabel as part of the temple guard of Darius, and he's going to give him the story, and he's going to basically say, then the king said to the king, remember your vow, which you vowed to build Jerusalem in the day when you came into your kingdom, and to send back the vessels which were taken out of Jerusalem, which Cyrus set apart when he vowed to destroy Babylon and vowed to send them back there. Well, these vessels were already sent back. They were already sent back in the days of Cyrus, because you have them accounted in Ezra. This is Ezra chapter 1 in the days of Cyrus. It says, and this is the 30 chargers of gold, 30 chargers of silver, 29 knives, 30 basins of gold, silver basins of the sort, 10,000. These are all the vessels that were taken by the Babylonians from the temple, the gold and silver utensils and everything they used in the temple ordinances, because it was basically a big barbecue. Cyrus sent it all back. See, also Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels from the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth. So in their story, they're changing it to, no, this is actually, Zerubbabel talks him into doing this in the days of Darius. Why? Because this is crap made up history. Remember, they don't have a book called the Bible back then. They have a canon of respected scriptures, just like the New Testament people do. Before the days of Nicaea, they have a canon of respected scriptures, but they're individual writings. They don't have a single book called the Bible. And so what are these guys trying to do? They're trying to replace Ezra and Nehemiah with Esdras, so that they can claim all this extra land in the face of the Romans, who are now kind of taking over, and claim they had this ancient right to it from the Persians. This is all bullcrap. They have an agenda, and see how they keep mentioning. He wrote letters to all the governors who were in Soel, Syria, and Phoenicia, and to them in Libanus, that's Lebanon, that they should bring up cedar wood from Libanus to Jerusalem, that they should help him build the city. No, they didn't. They didn't do this. What you have is you have, in the days of Nehemiah, him writing that they bring up stuff from the king's forest. So the king is apparently claiming the forest of Lebanon as his own. But what they're doing is they're setting this up. Remember, and that's going to be actually in the days of Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes is going to write decrees by the hand of Nehemiah that they go to the king's forest, so that's the Lebanese forest, and they can get the wood that they need to rebuild Jerusalem. But they're going to claim that's done in Darius's day, and then they're going to keep writing these letters, and then it says, and all the country which they occupy should be free from them without tribute, and that the Edomites should give up the villages of the Jews which they held at that time. It's not written either. What are they saying? Get these Edomites, because the Edomites start moving into Israel when the Nabateans push them out of Edom in the days after the Persians. And then the Edomites are going to occupy their land heavily in the days of the Nabateans. And what are they claiming? That these guys were ordered to give us back their villages they took. Well, they took them after this supposedly happened. But these are the Hasmoneans trying to clear out Israel of all non-Israelites and kick the Edomites out, force people to divorce their wives, get everything back to be a pure Israeli system. And let's see here. Then he says, and the priests, the sons of Phinehas, the sons of Aaron, Jesus, the son of Josedek, and the son of Sarias and Joachim, the son of Zerubbabel, the son of Salathiel of the house of David, the lineage of the Pharis of the tribe of Judah, who spoke wise words before Darius the king of Persia in the 2nd year of his reign in the month of Nisan, which is in the 1st month. So supposedly, you now have these people who are going up in the days of Cyrus, going up for the first time in the days of Darius. None of this makes sense. None of this makes sense anymore. And then it says, they returned to Jerusalem and to the parts of Judea, every man to his own city, who came with Zerubbabel. And notice he says, and Jesus, that's Joshua, and then Nehemiah. Okay, so let's look at that. Notice he doesn't have Ezra here. The reason is because in 2nd Ezra, they're going to try to convince you that Zerubbabel and Ezra are the same guy. They don't realize, let me take that back. They do realize, but they're writing revisionist history. Remember, they've taken over the priesthood by this time. So the real line of Zadok who's supposed to be there is out, and the Hasmoneans have taken it over. And you're going to have them trying to equate Zerubbabel with Ezra, and so they add Nehemiah returning with Zerubbabel. Now let's go look at the record of who really returned. So he says, here's who came with Zerubbabel. Now there is a Nehemiah here. Joshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, and Mordecai. And they're going to confuse this Nehemiah, who came up with Zerubbabel, with the later Nehemiah, who is going to be the cupbearer to the king who comes up. And this is going to be like 50 years later. It's not the same guy. So that's not actually a forgery. That's the same record. But they're going to confuse the two and think, well, if that's Nehemiah, then this must be Ezra. And that's why they're going to call Zerubbabel Ezra. And so it's a lot of this stuff is going to be pulled right from Nehemiah. So it's clear they're using the original record and they're pulling it right from that. But they're going to be adding stuff that syncs up Zerubbabel and that Nehemiah with Ezra and Nehemiah later on, 50 years later. Let's see. Now he says, when the description of the... So it talks about men. It says, when the description of the kindred of these men was sought and the register was not found, they were removed from executing the office of the priesthood. For Nehemiah and Azariah told them that they should not be partakers of the holy things until the high priest wearing the Urim and Thummim shall arise. What does this mean? Supposedly, they're going to, these are the people who want to be part of the priesthood, but they can't prove their lineage. They're saying, well, they can't be part of the lineage unless somebody can determine by the Urim and Thummim that they're legit. So let's compare this to what these guys are saying. It says, these sought a register among those that were reckoned by genealogy, but they were not found, therefore they were polluted and put away from the priesthood. And Tirshatha said to them, notice there's no Nehemiah here, Tirshatha, that they should not eat of the most holy things until there stood up of the priest of the Urim and the Thummim. He adds, in the place of Tirshatha, this Azariah and Nehemiah. Why? Because they're trying to merge this with Nehemiah, who comes there and is authoritative later. Then they forged this second letter. Let's see. King Darius commanded that the search be made of the archives, and this letter is going to be in Ezra. And he says, and I've commanded to build the house again. And it says that out of the tribute of Sol, Syria, and Phoenicia, the portion shall be carefully given to the men for the sacrifice of the Lord. That is to Zerubbabel, the governor, for bulls and rams and lambs. See how they have Zerubbabel being the governor. And they're merging him with Ezra, who is given this governorship in the days of Artaxerxes. So they're going to have this in the days of Darius. Okay? Now let's go look at Ezra, what the real letter says. He says, they sent a letter to him wherein was written thus, unto Darius the king, all peace. And he says that in the days of Cyrus, he says they were delivered to one who was named Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. All the vessels of the gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, he brought to the temple of Babylon. Those did Cyrus take out of the temple of Babylon, and they are delivered to one named Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. And he said unto him, take the vessels and carry them to the temple that is in Jerusalem, the house of God. And then came the same Sheshbazzar and laid the foundation of God that is in Jerusalem. And since that time, even till now, it has not been finished. So the Sheshbazzar seems to be another name for Zerubbabel. So what they're going to do here then is they're going to take these later decrees that are in the days of Ezra, and they're going to attach them to Zerubbabel. So if you go to Ezra towards the end, when we get to chapter 8, and now we're in the days of Artaxerxes the king. Artaxerxes the king, remember, Darius the Great is going to die in 486. Artaxerxes is going to be ruling in 465. And this is going to be in his 7th year. So we're looking at like close to 30 years later. And what they're going to do is they're going to merge this back, making Zerubbabel and Ezra the same person without actually saying it here. Now they're going to say it in 2nd Esdras, but they're kind of merging them together here. And it says that out of the tribute of Celesyria and Phoenicia, a portion shall be carefully given to the men for the sacrifices of the Lord, that is to Zerubbabel, the governor, for bulls, rams, and lambs. Now, there is nothing in here that says that Zerubbabel is the governor. There is this guy named Sheshbazzar, which would have been Zerubbabel's uncle, who is made the governor in the days of Cyrus. But we certainly don't have Zerubbabel made the governor in the book of Ezra anywhere that we can see. He just seems to be leading the people with Joshua the priest to go there, and then the Lord prophesies over him essentially that the Messiah is going to come from him. But we don't see any gubernatorial authority given to him. It seems to be his uncle that has that authority. But in the days of Artaxerxes, you're going to have in the book of Ezra, this is in chapter 7, that Artaxerxes says he makes a decree of all the people of Israel, of his priests and his Levites in my realm, which are minded of their own to go to free will Jerusalem, to go with thee. He's talking about Ezra. Remember, they're merging Ezra and Zerubbabel together. For as much as thou art sent of the king and the 7 counselors to inquire concerning Jerusalem, according to the law of God, which is in thy hand, carry silver and gold that the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel, whose habitation of Israel. And then he says, and all the silver and gold that you can find in the province of Babylon, with the free will offering the people and the priests offering willingly for the house of God which is at Jerusalem, that thou may speedily with money, with this money, may buy bullocks, rams, and all the stuff for the offering. So what is he doing? He's giving them money to buy this stuff and telling them they can take free will offerings for anyone who's willing to offer it in all his domain to buy the bulls and stuff like that. Okay, well in here, they're changing it that to say that out of the tribute of Soal, Syria, and Phoenicia, a portion shall be carefully given to these men for the sacrifice of the Lord, that is for Zerubbabel, for the governor, for bulls and rams and lambs. Okay, so they're changing from Artaxerxes giving them money to I think Darius ordering that basically the tribute of this land. Remember, they're claiming that he's given them governorship over all this land, and that the tribute of this land needs to go to them carrying out the sacrifices. Well, them carrying out the sacrifices is supposed to come from the people of Israel. It's not from the tribute of the Gentiles. But they are allowed to, in the law, buy with money the sacrifices that they needed for the sacrifice. And he gives them a bunch of money and allows them to collect essentially donations from this, which means probably from Jews that are scattered throughout the empire, that they can start carrying out the sacrifices. But again, this all happens in the days of Ezra under Artaxerxes, not under Darius, under Zerubbabel, and they're merging them together. And so then they said, Nansini is the governor of Selo, Syria, and Phoenicia, and these guys, blah, 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 very carefully supervise the holy work, assisting the elders of the Jews and the rulers of the temple. And it says the holy work prospered while, that's Haggai and Zechariah the prophets prophesied. They finished these things with the commandment of the Lord. And you see that they're merging this back to Ezra. Because it says, I, Artaxerxes, make a decree that all the treasures that are beyond the river, that whatever Ezra the priest ascribed to the law of the God of heaven shall require of you, be done speedily. And he talks about up unto 100 talents of silver, unto 100 measures of wheat, unto 100 baths of wine, to 100 baths of oil, without prescribing how much. Okay, so in other words, you guys beyond, he's writing a decree to his governors that are beyond the river. It just says beyond the river. It doesn't say Selo, Syria, and Phoenicia. And it's Artaxerxes in the days of Ezra, not Darius in the days of Zerubbabel. And he's saying that give them what they need for their offerings, essentially. Basically, figure out how to get it. I mean, he's not giving them an exact amount. He's not prescribing how much. He's just saying give them what they need to carry out their sacrifices through taxes. So these are different things. One is in Darius, allowing them to rebuild the temple. The other is in the days of Ezra, which is later, which is giving them the things they need to carry on the sacrifices through donations from the state. And what these guys are claiming is that, no, they rule over all this place. They've ruled over all this place since the days of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel's the governor. And basically that they had to give the portion of their taxes for all time to raise up what they needed for the temple ordinances. Then they finished these things by the command of the Lord and with the consent of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. That's in Ezra. And then it says, after these things, when Artaxerxes, the king of the Persians, reigned, Esdras came, who was the son of Azarias, the son of Zechariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Salem. So now what are they going to do with Ezra? Well, they're putting in Ezra in the story again. But they're taking all the stuff that applied to Ezra and making it apply to Zerubbabel. And he says, and you, Ezra, according to the wisdom of God, ordain judges and justices that you may judge all in Syria and Phoenicia. Notice it in Ezra, it says those beyond the river, meaning the Jordan, and they're saying all of Syria and Phoenicia. And all those who don't know the law of God and those who don't know it, you shall teach. And they're merging this together. So what they're doing is in the days of Artaxerxes, they're now putting the things of Ezra in there, but they were taking all these things from the days of Ezra and applying them to Zerubbabel before this, and now they have Ezra again. Well, it's making clear who Ezra is. That he's the priest and reader of the law. But for some reason, they're trying to take all these things from Ezra and put them back to Zerubbabel and make them essentially civil jurisdiction. And essentially, they just slap on the books, the last few chapters of Ezra at the end of this, like it's nothing. And then, let's see, and then Ezra rose up from the court of the temple, and he's talking about them forcing the people to put away their foreign wives. And it lists all the people that they forced to put away their foreign wives, and that's the end. So essentially what they do is they go into Ezra, they add this fake story about Zerubbabel, and then they merge all these civil authorities that were given to Ezra under Artaxerxes to say that they were given to Zerubbabel under Darius, and then they just go slap the end of Ezra on the end of it. So it's clear what their plan is to use this to replace Ezra. Now, they don't make a replacement for Nehemiah, but they add Nehemiah into places to make it sound like he's the same Nehemiah as the governor Nehemiah. And what they're doing very poorly is trying to make it sound like Ezra and Nehemiah were contemporary with Zerubbabel and Joshua. And that's just all one thing that happened in a generation. And they don't really understand that from, one is Ahasuerus isn't there, and the time from Artaxerxes to Darius is from 486 BC to 465 BC. There's a 20-year gap there. They're not accounting these things because they don't have an historical record to compare it to. And so what they end up with is this jumbled record. And if you read Josephus when he's talking about this era, it doesn't make any sense, because he has more access to the Persian records at this time, and he is trying to consolidate and coordinate things that are in Esdras and in the additions to Esther, and they're just not making sense of these records anymore. And so that's essentially Esdras. That's what it is. And again, it's just a jacked up book. It's just a jacked up version of Ezra with additions and subtractions and change names and stuff like that in it. So now we get to these additions to Esther, and they're not that important, but they're easily provable fraud. So basically, the additions to Esther is going to contain supposedly a prophetic dream that Mordecai had, because there were doubts. There were doubts in apparently the Second Temple period and also the early church as to whether Esther was canon, because there's no prophetic anything in it and no mention of God in it. Okay, well, the book of Esther is typologically very significant because there's a lot of things that look like God in the Old and New Covenant, and like the 10 kings and the Antichrist versus Christ and all this stuff in the church and all this stuff going on in Esther. Okay, you won't understand the meaning, the spiritual meaning of Esther. It has a historical meaning, but the spiritual meaning you won't understand unless you have the Holy Spirit in the New Covenant. Okay, you have to plug that in. You have to plug in the book of Revelation. You have to plug in the cross. You have to plug in the church, being a Gentile that's really a Jew, Gentile on the outside, Jew on the inside. That's who Esther is. But they don't like Esther, and here's why. It doesn't fit with their narrative, because in this time they have merged. One is they think Xerxes and Artaxerxes are the same person, because Ahasuerus is mentioned in Esther, but they think is mentioned in Ezra, but they think Ahasuerus and Artaxerxes are the same person. And so there's this gap of time and this story which takes place when somebody made a decree to wipe out all the Jews, and it's not mentioned in Ezra anywhere. So it doesn't make sense to them. Well, that's because they're not accounting the 50-year, the whole generation gap in Ezra, which is when that happened, in the days of Ahasuerus. Okay, so in the days of Ahasuerus, this is Xerxes. That's when Haman's going to try to have the Jews killed. And what they do is they want to spice this thing up to make it look more prophetic, and so they make up this story about Mordecai having a prophetic dream, which is not in there at all. Mordecai is apparently part of the king's court in Susa. Esther is married to the king, so he's probably got some low-key favor from the eunuchs and stuff like that, and he's allowed to hang out because they know that he's the uncle to Queen Esther. And it talks about, I'm going to just show you in the beginning, it says that this prophetic dream that Mordecai has is in the second year of Artaxerxes. Well, this is a problem, because Esther is married to Artaxerxes' father. And this dream is apparently what he's claiming is behind his conflict with Haman. And Xerxes is not going to take over, Artaxerxes is not going to take over rule until like 12, 13, 14, 15 years after Xerxes and Esther get married. So that none of this makes sense. In fact, I've been doing some research on that history, and it looks like Xerxes married Esther, and then Esther had a daughter when she was in her late 20s who, as soon as she was of age, married Darius, the firstborn son of Xerxes. And so it looks like the named successor to the throne of Persia would have been Xerxes' son from his previous wife, Queen Vashti, and Esther's daughter as his queen. which is, they would have been half brother and half sister, but it would have been totally legit. And what Vashti seems to do is orchestrate to have Darius killed, Xerxes killed, Esther killed, Esther's daughter killed, and Xerxes to take over the throne. That seems to be what happens. And that's a lot of history that I have to unravel. It's probably going to be in my Serpent by the Way book. But it looks like in those skittish records between the transitions in the Greeks, you have two periods. You have when Xerxes takes over, there's a coup there, and then when Cyrus takes over from the Medes, there's some kind of coup or something there, and you have a bunch of disparate records at that time. But you can make out these records to work because you have this woman named Atassa, and Esther's true name is Hadassah, and this daughter, this supposedly that Xerxes, this 12-year-old or 13 or 14-year-old girl that Xerxes is apparently sleeping with, which would have been Esther's age, when she married the king. And they mix up this story, and it's all about how this woman gets brutally killed and her breast cut off and all this stuff like that. And then Xerxes takes over. Well, Xerxes would have been third in line for the throne. And what it looks like is the guy that was first in line is killed. The guy who was second in line is out in Bactria running the government out there. And they have a brief civil war, and then Xerxes takes over. And then that guy and him eventually have a civil war, and he kills him too. So, and this all happens by the time Xerxes is like 20. So by the time Mordecai is sniffing the plan of Haman, you're probably looking at Xerxes being, if anything, a little kid. At most, a teenager at this time, definitely not ruling, but they think Ahasuerus and Artaxerxes are the same person because they sound alike. They're wrong. And so this whole record of the story, it's about two dragons that represent Mordecai and Haman, and how Mordecai gets the win at the end. It's just a fake story. It's just another story like that Zerubbabel and his Arabian Nights wisdom tale of women, how beautiful they are or whatever. And they just make up these stories, and then they just say, okay, and that story falls into how Mordecai uncovers the plot to save the king's life, and it falls into how Haman gets doomed for trying to have him killed. So then they go right back to calling him Artaxerxes to calling him Ahasuerus again, because these are chapters that they're slapping on the end of Esther, just like they slap chapters on the end of Daniel. These are fake history. These are tall tales that don't work. And the second one is all about how Esther fasts and mourns and all this stuff before she goes to the king. She says such a noble prayer and all this stuff. And God gives her favor with the king and turns his heart because of that. And then at the end of it, this is how you know this is fake. One of the rules of the Medes and Persians, and this comes into play in Esther and in Daniel, this is a rule among their kings. And I don't know if this goes back to Zoroastrianism or where it comes from, but when a king gives his word, his decree, he can't take it back. And that's why Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, and that's why the Jews almost gets killed. And that's why Xerxes writes a second law. See, these are meant to be types of the law in the New Covenant, which allow the Jews to rise up and defend themselves against the first decree. Just like the New Covenant defends us against our condemnation under the law. See, that typology makes sense to a New Testament Christian. But when you have the Jews, they don't know about a New Covenant. They don't understand this. They don't understand Jeremiah. They're not reading this crap. And so what he does in there is he just says that basically that Ahasuerus wrote this big long letter, and that's what chapter 16 is repealing his earlier decree. Well, according to Daniel and Esther, he's not allowed to do that. One of the things, even the king can't repeal their own laws. Once that word goes out of the mouth of the king, it's law, and even he can't change it. It's like, it's almost like the Pope speaking in ex cathedra. He's speaking out of the church. What does that mean? It means he's speaking for God. That's kind of what it is. And this is a typological reference to God giving his word, and God never can go back on his word once he's given it, because that would make God a liar. But he pre-planned for the new covenant, which would save us from the condemnation under the law. And you have this beautiful typology, the old and new covenant in Esther, But they destroy it by saying Ahasuerus just wrote a second letter repealing his first letter. Well, that's not what happens with the law. The law doesn't get repealed. Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. He came to fulfill it so that those are in Christ are not subject to the penalties of the law. But the law still is there. The law still condemns all men of sin. It still holds that purpose. And that's why Paul, who says the law is abolished for us who are in Christ, says, but the law is still good if you use it lawfully, which is it's there to condemn people until they're in Christ. And so they take away the typology by saying, oh, King Ahasuerus just wrote this letter to repeal his earlier command, which was against Persian law. So, long story short, additions to Esther, we're going to say claims Xerxes and Artaxerxes are the same person. And again, it directly contradicts Esther. So they claim Xerxes and Artaxerxes are the same person. That's false. That's a party foul. And then they claim that Xerxes took back his decree to kill the Jews, which is a direct contradiction of what actually happens in Esther, because he writes a second decree allowing them to defend themselves, which wouldn't make sense if he repealed the first decree. It would have been illegal for them to be killing the Jews. So it just fails. These are just, they slap them on the end of the book, and they don't bother to actually read the book and coordinate them and say, hey, would this make sense, yes or no? No. Okay? So that's the additions to Esther. Now we're going to go to 2nd Esdras. Makes Ezra a prophet. So, there used to be this group when I was in high school called Better Than Ezra. We're going to call 2nd Esdras Better Than Ezra. Why? Because in Ezra, he is not a prophet. He's a scribe. He's a priest. He's not the high priest, but he's a scribe and a priest. Okay? And 2nd Ezra, there's additional Ezras. There's like 3rd and 4th Ezras too. We don't want to get into all this stuff because they're just like the Essene tradition. We have an Ezra tradition of people BSing further Ezra material. Well, in 2nd Ezra, you have this book by the prophet Ezra, the son of Sarias, the son of Azarias, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Selemus, the son of Sadok, the son of Ahitub. This is clearly the Ezra from Ezra's. All the way back to Aaron of the tribe of Levi, was captive in the land of the Medes in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of the Persians. He was never in the land of the Medes, actually. He was in the region of Babylon. It actually tells you in Ezra a town he comes from, and it's the town up the Euphrates River from Babylon. He's not ever in the Medes lands. Artaxerxes was the king when he was there, and Artaxerxes he goes down in the reign of Artaxerxes, and he gets the governorship of the land from Artaxerxes. And he probably has a relationship with Nehemiah. Nehemiah is probably orchestrating the stuff in the background. But what we have right here is we have in the beginning, you have Ezra saying this. Again, they're all copying Daniel, saying this very righteous prayer about how wicked we were and how we deserved what we got. And this is why the God gives them visions and stuff. And one of the things he says, I gathered you together as a hen gathers chicks under her wings. And this is where people are going to be like, see, Jesus quoted it. First of all, we have no evidence that this was written before Christ. So we have no evidence that Christ is quoting this because there's no evidence in the letter, in the provenance, or in the citations of the letter that 2nd Esdras was written before Christ. It was probably written after. Okay? And so the gathering together as chickens gathers under their wings, that is clearly a reference to something Jesus said. I sent you my prophets whom you have taken and slain and torn their bodies in pieces, whose blood I will require from you, says the Lord. That is clearly taken from Jesus. The Lord Almighty says, your house is left to you desolate, and I will cast you out as wind blows stubble. That is taken from Jesus. How do I know this is a forgery? How do I know it was taken from the time of Jesus? How do I know Ezra couldn't have possibly written this? This is how. He says, and now, Father, behold with glory and see the people that have come from the east, to whom I will give for leaders. Now, this is supposedly something that is Ezra is saying. And he says, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Hosea, Amos, Micah, Joel, Abadiah, Jonah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who is called the Lord's messenger. Now, why is that significant? Because you're missing major prophets. You're missing Moses, you're missing Isaiah, you're missing Elijah, you're missing Samuel, you're missing tons of people. But why does he give you this list right here? And this is simple. It's one book, which the Jews have in the Second Temple period by the time of Josephus, we know, which is called the prophets. And it's all 12 in order. And the last one is Malachi. These are the minor prophets. So we see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then we see Hosea, Amos, Micah, Joel, Obadiah, Jonah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. It's that book in order that he's citing these prophets. And Malachi wasn't till after Ezra. Maybe Ezra was alive when Malachi prophesied, but one is Ezra's not a prophet. Two is Malachi would have been after him. And three, we have no evidence that these 12 prophets were put in that canonical order. That canonical order of all these books being written in the prophets seems to be late Second Temple period. So it's literally, Malachi is a rebuke of what Ezra is doing. But Nehemiah is also doing it like 13 years later. And in Nehemiah, Ezra is mentioned, so they're both around at this time. And it is likely that Ezra is around when Malachi is rebuking him. But we have no idea who took those 12 minor prophets and put them into a single book. The earliest reference we have to that is the Septuagint, and the earliest copies of the Septuagint we have are from the 2nd century, which would be up to 200 years before Ezra. Could Ezra have been the guy who compiled those 12 prophets into a single volume, like you have this list here? And the answer is yes. It could have been Ezra who was around, but the idea of Ezra prophesying and then referencing these 12 guys as a single volume, like they've been like that for a while, is not likely. So, so it talks about the Jews who deny the covenant. Let them be scattered abroad among the heathen. Let their names be blotted out of the earth, for they have despised the covenant. Tell my people that I will give them the kingdom of Jerusalem, which I would have given to Israel. Mother, embrace your children. I will bring them out of the wilderness like a dove does. Establish their feet, for I have chosen you, says the Lord. I will raise those who are dead again from their places and bring them out from their tombs, for I recognize my names in them. So it's giving clear testimony to the resurrection. For your help, I will send my servants Isaiah and Jeremy, after whose counsel I have sanctified and prepared for you 12 trees laden with various fruits. These 12 trees laden with various fruits come from the book of Revelation, and it's clearly meant to be a reference to the 12 apostles. So this is a post-Christian work trying to make it sound like it was a prophecy of Ezra, kind of like, kind of like wisdom. So it's in that category of writings that wisdom is. And it says, and as many springs flowing with milk and honey, and 7 mighty mountains on which roses and lilies grow, with which I will fill your children with joy. Whenever you find the dead, set a sign upon them and commit them to the grave, and I will give you first place in my resurrection. I, Esdras, received the command from the Lord on Mount Horeb, which is in Sinai. Ezra was never there, to go to Israel, but when I came to them, they rejected me and rejected the Lord's commandment. So this is Ezra claiming that he went to Mount Horeb, and then they rejected him as a prophet when he's a priest and a scribe. Arise and stand up and see the number of those who have been sealed at the Lord's feast. In the 30th year after the ruin of the city, I, Salathiel, this is Zerubbabel's dad. Salathiel, also called Esdras, was in Babylon. Okay, so what they're claiming here, I forgot that they were making Ezra and Zerubbabel sound like the same person. They're actually saying Ezra is Salathiel, who is Zerubbabel's dad through the Levirate law. Why? This doesn't make any sense. I don't know why. But also called Ezra was in Babylon, and he's talking about this prophecy. He says, your glory went through the 4 gates of fire, earthquake, of wind, and ice, that you might give the law to the descendants of Jacob and the command to the descendants of Israel. He says, for the first Adam, burdened with the wicked heart, transgressed and was overcome, and were all who are descended with him. Okay, you don't have a reference to the first Adam in Judaism, because in order for you to have a reference to the first Adam, you'd have to have a second Adam, which is Christ. So nobody would refer to Adam as the first Adam. Thus disease was made permanent. The law was in the heart of the people, along with the wickedness of the root. So the good departed away from that which was wicked remained. And they're talking about the law being around since Adam. That's throwback to the book of Jubilees. The angel who was sent to me, whose name was Uriel, gave him the answer. So he's getting a prophecy from Uriel. That's hearkening back to the book of Enoch and Tobit and things like that. To them, Jeremiel, the archangel, answered. So they're going to get into this 7 archangels thing, but they're going to keep changing their names back and forth because they can't figure out who they are because they're made up. So Jeremiel, the archangel, and then he says, he said to me, in Hades, the chambers of the soul are like a womb, for just like a woman in labor hurries to escape the anguish of labor pains, even so these places hurry to deliver those things that are committed to them in the beginning. What is this talking about? This is a Christian interpretation. Notice it's Hades, it's the Greek, it's not Sheol. This is a Christian interpretation of Isaiah 26 about the grave giving birth to her dead, which is they wouldn't know until Paul revealed that in Romans 11, in Romans 8. Let's see, then he says he's praying, he's talking to the angel. He says, do you think that I will live in that time, or who will be alive in those days? And he answered me, as for the signs you asked me about, I may tell you of them in part, but I wasn't sent to tell you about your life, for I don't know. So he's asking him for prophecy. He says, the land that you now see ruling will be a trackless waste, and men will see it desolate. Remember, this is Ezra, so this is supposed to be in the Persians. The sun will suddenly shine in the night, and the moon in the day. Blood will drop out of wood, and the stone will utter its voice, and the people will be troubled, and the stars will fall. What the crap is this? This is stuff out of the book of Revelation. The Sodomite sea will cast out fish. This is actually a transliteration of Isaiah, where it talks about the Dead Sea will be a freshwater sea with fish in it again. And then it says, and make a noise in the night, which many have not known, but all will hear its voice. Women will bring forth monsters. Salt waters will be found in the sweet, and all friends will destroy one another. I am permitted to show you such signs that if you pray again and weep as now and fast 7 days, you will hear yet greater things than these. So fast and pray longer, and you'll get more prophetic visions. So I fasted 7 days, mourning and weeping, and as Uriel, the angel, commanded me. His name went from being Jeremiel to being Uriel again. And then he calls him, O sovereign Lord. Why? Then he said to me, just as you have done of these things that I have spoken, even so you can't find out my judgments or the end of the love which I have promised my people. That sounds very much like Romans. Even so, I have given the womb of the earth to those who are sown in it for their own times. Again, this would be a Christian teaching that was clarified by Paul. Let's see. Or when will be the end of the first and the beginning of the age that follows? He said, what will be the dividing of the times? So that would have been a reference to Daniel. Or when will be the end of the first age and the beginning of the age to follow? And he said to me, from Abraham, Isaac, because Jacob and Esau were born from him, Jacob's hand held Esau's heel from the beginning. For Esau is in the end of the age, and Jacob is the beginning of the one that follows. So he's claiming that Esau clutching Jacob's heel is the end of Jacob being the end of the age of the first Adam, and the beginning of the age of the second Adam. So you can tell it's another writing like wisdom that is meant to point the Jews from the writings of the Old Testament to the gospel without being clear that it's doing that, but it's just making up a bunch of stuff and saying Ezra said it. Behold, the days will come when I will draw near to visit those who dwell on the earth, when the affliction of Zion is complete. Books will be opened before the firmament. The children a year old will speak their voices. A woman will deliver premature children at 3 or 4 months, and they will live and dance. The trumpet will give sound, which when every man hears, they will be suddenly afraid. It will be that whoever remains after all these things that I have told you of, he will be saved, and he will see my salvation in the end of the world. They will see the men that have been taken up and who have not tasted death from their birth. So that's a reference to the rapture. The heart of the inhabitants will be changed and turned to a different spirit. If therefore you will pray again and fast 7 more days, I will tell you even greater things than these. For your voice has surely been heard before the Most High, and the Mighty has seen your righteousness, and he has also seen your purity, which you have maintained ever since your youth. So this is the theme of these Jewish writings in like the Essene period and beyond, that they're so righteous, God gives them gifts and blessings because they're so righteous. He talks about the 7 days of creation as a kind of prophecy, which kind of sounds like the septimillennial theory. On the 7th part where the water in the ground was gathered together that it should produce living creatures. For the 7th part, namely, the water was gathered together that it might hold both. But to the Leviathan you gave the 7th part, namely the watery part. O Lord, behold these nations which are reputed as nothing, being rulers over us and devouring us. But we, your people, whom you have called your firstborn, your only children, and your fervent lover, are given into their hands. Even so also is Israel's portion. I made the world for their sakes. What was now done was decreed when Adam transgressed my statutes. That sounds about like the fatalistic determinism of the Essenes. For behold, a time will come, and it will be when these signs of which I told you before will come to pass, that the bride will appear, even the city coming forth, and she will be seen who now is withdrawn from the earth. Who is that talking about? It's obviously talking about stuff that's in Hebrews and Revelation and not in any Jewish writings. The city that's a bride, this is not referenced in the Old Testament anywhere. For my son Jesus will be revealed with those who are with him, and those who remain will rejoice 400 years. Why 400 years? I don't know. After these years, my son Christ will die, along with all of those who have the breath of life. This is some weird Essene Christian literature. So Jesus is going to die after 400 years, along with all the people who have the breath of life? What are you talking about here? The pit of torment will appear, and near it will be a place of rest, and the furnace of hell will be shown, and near a paradise of delight. It will endure as though it were a week of years. For this reason, the Most High has not made one world, but two. They are set on fire and burn hotly and are extinguished. So it's teaching annihilationism. It's teaching that there's going to be like 2 worlds to come, a heavenly and a hellish world to come, but that Jesus and the righteous who are raptured rule for just 400 years. And it will come if those who have been scorners have not kept the way of the Most High and have despised his law and who hate those who fear God. These spirits won't enter into habitations, but will wander and be in torments immediately. The 4th order they understand, the rest which being gathered into their chambers they now enjoy with great quietness, guarded by angels, and the glory that awaits them in the last days. This is talking about people in Sheol. He said their freedom will be for 7 days, and for 7 days they will see the things that you have been told, and afterwards they will be gathered together in their habitations. So I was reading this, and I'm just like, I don't know what this is. There's just endless stuff in here that shows hints of Essene stuff, that shows hints of Christian stuff, that clearly shows evidence of having read the New Testament. When was this written? Probably after wisdom was written. Let's see. She said to me, I, your servant, was barren and had no child, though I was had a husband 30 years. Every hour and every day these 30 years I made it my prayer to the Most High day and night. So this is about some woman that in this second Esdras, apparently there's some woman that he goes who's barren and he makes her have kids or something like that because he's a prophet with magical powers now. Then he's looking for Uriel again. He wants some more visions and stuff. Where is Uriel, who came to me at the first? For he has caused me to fall in a great trance, and my end has turned to corruption, and my prayer to reproach. Where is Uriel? My son died when he entered into his marriage chamber, and the misfortune befell her. That was the destruction that came to Jerusalem. So apparently this woman represents the destruction that came to Jerusalem, and her husband, or her son, going to the bridal chamber but dying is representing Christ dying when he's about to collect his bride. Very clear throwbacks to Christ here. The woman died when she entered into the marriage chamber, or the son died when he entered into his marriage chamber. It came to pass in the second night I saw a dream. Behold, an eagle had 12 feathered wings, and 3 heads came up from the sea. What are these 12 feathered wings and 3 heads that came up? I think this is representing the 12 tribes of Israel and the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Herodians that Jesus rebuked. That would be my guess. One of the heads goes down, but the 2 heads remain, which also reigned the same way over the earth and took over those who dwell in it. Oh, I think at some point in time I thought this might have been the Roman triumvirate or something like this, or the Roman Empire being split later on. And I apologize. It's been like a month since I read this, just because I've been working on different things. When I read it, I was trying to figure out, is this the Romans they're talking about, or Israel they're talking about? He has this prophecy about this empire that's going to rule for a while, and then it gets corrupt or wicked or something like that. He has a prophecy of 4 beasts like Daniel, so it's like a Daniel ripoff. He says, aren't you the one that remains of the 4 animals whom I made to reign over the world, that my end times might come through them? And the 4th came and overcame all the animals that were past, and ruled the world with great trembling, and the whole extent of the earth with grievous oppression. He lived on the earth such a long time with deceit. The eagle which you saw came up from the sea as the 4th kingdom, which appeared in the vision to your brother Daniel. So there you go. He's telling him the eagle is Rome. 12 kings will reign in it, and one after another, and of those a second will begin to reign, and will reign for a longer time than the other 12. Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars. So this is probably written after that. So you're talking this is probably a 3rd century work. In it 8 kings will arise, whose times will be short and their years swift. 2 of them will perish from the middle time approaches. 4 will be kept for a while until the end of the time, and the ending of it will approach. But 2 will be kept to the end. In its last days the Most High will raise up 3 kingdoms and renew many things in them, and they will rule in the earth. What are these 3 kingdoms? I have no idea. It signifies that one of them will die in his bed, yet with pain, for the sword of the one will devour them that was with him, and he will fall by the sword in the last days. The lion whom you saw rising up out of the forest, roaring, speaking to the eagle, and rebuking her for unrighteousness, and all our words that you have heard. This is the anointed one, whom the Most High has kept for the end of days, who will spring up out of the seed of David, and he will come and speak to them, and reprove them for their wickedness and unrighteousness, and will heap up before them their contemptuous dealings. Therefore write all these things that I have seen in a book, put them in a secret place. And this is another theme that's in Ezra, and also the Essene writings. These seem like 2 competing versions of secret mystery cults. Write all these things and that you've seen in the book and put it in a secret place. You shall teach them to the wise of your people whose hearts you know are able to comprehend and keep these secret writings. They're all gathered together from the least to the greatest. I don't know what that is. Afterward, I saw a man came down from the mountain to call himself another multitude, which was peaceful. Good for them. My son will be revealed, whom you saw a man ascending. He will stand on Mount Zion. Zion will come, will be shown to you all the men, being prepared and built, like you have saw in a mountain carved without hands. This is Daniel. Whereas you have saw that he gathered himself another multitude that was peaceful. These are the 10 tribes which were led away out of the land in the time of Hosea, the king, who Salmanasar, the king of the Syrians, has set away captive, and he carried them beyond the river, and they were taken to another land. But they made plain among themselves that they would leave a multitude of heathen. They would leave the multitude of the heathen and go out to a more distant region where mankind had never lived, and there they might keep their own statutes, which they had not kept in their own land. So it is claiming that the church is essentially the dispersed of northern Israel. That's where that idea comes from. For the Most High then did signs for them and stopped over the springs of the river until they passed over. For they of that country was along the same way, namely go a year and a half. The same region is called Arzareth. Maybe that's supposed to be Nazareth. It will therefore, when he will destroy the multitude of the nations that are gathered together, he will defend the people that remains. He said to me, as no one can explore and know what is in the depths of the sea, even no man on earth can see my son or those who are with him except in the time of his day. Good for them. Prepare yourself many tablets and take with you Sariah, Debariah, Selemiah, Athanias, and Aziel, these 5 which are ready to write swiftly. And I came here and I'll write a lamp. Oh, so this is what second Ezra is going to claim. It's going to claim that he gets 90 some books. 90 some books. And that I think it's like 92. And he's saying 26 of them give to everybody. And then he's saying the rest are secret, that you're going to reveal only to the wise. So he's claiming that there are all these secret books that were given to these scribes of Ezra when he was a prophet. I opened my mouth, and behold, a cup was handed me. It was full of something like water, but its color was like fire. I took it and drank, and when I had drunk it, my heart uttered understanding, and wisdom grew in my chest, and my spirit retained its memory. So in 40 books, 94 books were written. So what are they claiming? Oh, there's 94 secret books there. And he says, the first books that you have written, publish openly, and let the worthy and unworthy read them. But keep the last 70, that you may deliver them to the people who those are wise among the people. So I would assume the 24 books are meant to be the Old Testament. And then these last 70 books are meant to be secret books that are for the Gnostics. Then the dragons will have the upper hand, remembering their nature. Of course they will. Then they will go on steadily to Babylon and destroy her. Woe to you, Babylon and Asia. Woe to you, Egypt and Syria. O my people, hear the word. Prepare for battle, and in those calamities be like strangers on the earth. What is this? What is this nonsense? Is it an Essene writing? I don't know. When was this thing written? I don't know. You can look at the research on it. The earliest possible allusion to this thing is Clement of Alexandria. But more than likely, he's just alluding to things that are similar to things in it because they're in Ezra and Revelation, or in Daniel and Revelation. I did do the research on this, and I apologize, I forgot. But you see Ambrose Milan, this is post-Christian, this is after the 12 Caesars. What this seems to be writing, what this seems to be referencing, is the rise and fall of Rome. That's what the eagle seems to be. And it seems to be a rise and fall of Rome and a mystical underground movement of secret writings. This is probably a Gnostic writing. There is nothing in this that suggests that this was written. I mean, who has in their canon? So it was in the Latin Vulgate. The Eastern Orthodox Church, the Anglicans, and I think the Ethiopians. It was in the King James Bible originally, and it's in the Ethiopian Church. So this Slavic Orthodox Church. So this book that has a provenance that is likely post 2nd century BC. We really don't know where it comes from. We're guessing post 2nd century. I don't want to research this one more thoroughly because it's so loaded with obvious allusions to the New Testament in it that there's no way you could believe this is Second Temple period even. Makes Ezra a prophet, mentions the 7 archangels, mentions Christ coming back and dying again. Why would you have a writing, let's think about this, that's supposedly part of 70 hidden books that talk about Christ coming back to life and ruling and reigning with the saints for 400 years and then dying again, which the first clear reference we have to it is in Jerome's Vulgate. Think about that. Christ comes back to life after 400 years. Where are you? You're in the Roman Christendom period. So what it looks like is probably a propaganda for Christendom. It's probably what it is. And so what you're having is they're saying after this 400 years, they're done with their reign. So apparently that reign was a spiritual reign. And then it talks about people either going to heaven or hell after that, which you have people going to purgatory and all this other stuff by that time. And so what it seems like it's trying to do is claim that after 400 years, which Theodosian would have legalized Nicene Christianity as the state religion by 375, and then by the Vulgate is written in the days of Jerome, that's going to be within actually right around 400 years from Christ. And it could have been something that's slapped together at that time. I don't know how anybody could be this dumb to think this is whatever this is. There are people that are claiming that the Jesus in it is Joshua the priest, and that there's going to be 400 years from Joshua the priest, the coming of Messiah, but there's nothing you can get out of this. And when you have these so-called apocryphal books that make no sense, what you have is people then claiming that there's this apocryphal genre of basically bullcrap literature where people make these weird political commentaries with all these crazy symbols and allusions, and they use stuff like this to say, and that's why you can't understand Daniel or Revelation, because it's just another book like these. Well, the problem is Daniel and Revelation are actual prophecies, and stuff like this in Enoch are actual bullcrap. And they're trying to lump them all together into one genre because they don't have the Holy Spirit and they can't tell the difference. That's what's wrong with it, okay? So, Ezra's additions to Daniel. When would I put these things in order? I would say probably first Ezra's was written after the Maccabees, trying to claim more land for themselves. Additions to Ezra, or to Esther. I'm going to say probably in that 140 BCE area, because these are probably, we know this stuff. We know this stuff is in Josephus, so it's been around for a little bit, and they're probably in that period where they're asking people to come up with a bunch of fake books for their library, and that's when they're coming up with them. Second Esdras, we're putting that way down here at the bottom after Wisdom. So Second Esdras, I'm going to say 200 to honestly 400. Or let's see. Yeah, 200 to 400 CE. Somewhere before, it could have been before Clement of Alexandria, or it could have been before Jerome. We don't know. It's a piece of crap. It's just a piece of crap literature. It's nothing prophetic. It's nothing significant. It's trying to tie things to Christ, but what it's really clearly trying to do is trying to get people open to the idea that there's a bunch of secret books out there that only the wise can learn about. Anytime you see allusions to secret heavenly tablets in any writing that you're reading, or stuff that came from angels to this special guy, or stuff that was told to be kept secret and only taught to the wise, it's automatically Gnostic. It's not from God. It's secret mystery cult stuff. Throw it out. It's garbage. So second Esdras is an easy throw it in the trash can. It's not, oh, can you learn anything about the history? No, nothing in it's true. It's a complete fabrication. This is fake propaganda history. This is fake propaganda legends and myths, just like Tobit and all this crap. It's just fake crap. There's nothing good in here, okay? So we're up to the 2nd century. Additions to Ezra. Remember, this is when they're claiming to write 5th century, and I'm saying these were written in the 2nd century or possibly up to the 4th century AD, so within 500 years. So it's within 1,000 years of when it claims to be written. That's accurate. All we got left is Sirach and 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and I'm going to be done with this soul-draining reading and studying of the apocryphal literature. I apologize, this one was not as clean and smooth as some other ones. I'm going to try to clip it out and edit it up, but these books, I'm reading them and they're just like, I don't get how you can have the Holy Spirit in you and not read this stuff and go, this is obvious that this is not scripture. But when you have guys like SoCal Preston and that whole crowd in the, all things eschatology and the Standing for Truth crowd, that whole crowd range from Calvinists and people who are more like evangelical normies to people who consider themselves scholars and master debaters who clearly aren't born again. And when you deal with these scholars who are like, oh, that's apocalyptic genre, and you can't authoritatively say what's in and out of the canon, these are just liberals. And liberals probably aren't born again. And so when they read 2nd Maccabees and Wisdom and 2nd Esdras, they can't tell that this is not scripture. They're not looking for historical accuracy because they don't believe the Bible's historically accurate. They're not looking for thematic, spiritual things that connect and are like synchronicity between the different prophets because they don't understand the prophets. So they make these things out to be whatever they want them to be, and they're not going to understand these things well enough to call bullcrap. But if you have the Holy Spirit and you have discernment and you know your Bible well, again, Esther, we looked at that. It conflicts with Esther. It conflicts with Persian history. It conflicts with Persian law, which is described in Esther and Daniel. And it destroys the typology of Esther. So those are crap. First Esdras conflicts with Ezra. It is off by 50 to 100 years in some places. It conflicts with history. It conflicts with Scripture. That's crap. Second Esdras conflicts with Scripture, conflicts with prophecy. It says Jesus comes and dies again. That's crap. These are not things that you have to be like, I'm kind of on the fence. I don't know. Maybe, there's a majority of Christians who have that in their Bible. No. I don't care if the majority of Christians are celibate priests who baptize babies. They're all wrong. The majority can be wrong. We have a long history of that being the case. You just trust your gut and go, these are all garbage. Now, we're down to Sirach, and Sirach is going to be, I'll get into that, but it's basically, most of it is good practical wisdom, ranging from clear writings of someone who's read the Bible quite a bit, to stuff that's probably practical in their current culture, to stuff that's kind of stupid. Like, it literally tells you, like, if you're at a party, like, go so you don't overeat or whatever. So it's promoting bulimia. And then first and second Maccabees are going to contradict each other somewhat fanciful, but it's clear Maccabean propaganda. And so those are probably the earliest stuff of all this, but claiming to be the later stuff of all this. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, I apologize. This is not as good as some of the other ones I was doing, but we're almost done. I hate this series. I'm doing it because I know people are falling for this crap, and then I'm going to be done and move on to something else, and I'm going to be a lot happier. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Batman out. Peace.